what it is that we do, right? This is questioning, this act is questioning what is it that we do as educators. And this is where free air is just, you know, amazing. The intent that I have is to go against, literally, I'm the bad guy here, I'm evil. This is why I have fascination with Decepticons and all things bad. My intent is to go against what I have been programmed to do, which is, I've spent my entire life to get to this point. And I'm supposed to be in a classroom just giving my lectures to my students, and that's it. For those of you who don't have money, oh well. Cough up $3,000, you can sit in one of my classes for 13 weeks. Otherwise, I can't help you. But everything inside of me tells me that that's wrong. And so I have to rage against the machine, right? And this is how this rage manifests, right? So you are either going to conform to the law, you're going to conform to the establishment. So if you want to visualize this, right, there's an establishment. And this establishment is a brick. It's a solid brick. And here is the individual. You shouldn't even be able to see it. And what the establishment does, right, what the establishment does is to tell me what I ought to do. Right? What I ought to do, what I must do. And who am I? Who am I to challenge the establishment? Right? So what typically happens now is that I have to cower, right? I'm so small and insignificant. You know, the institution of higher education as it is now is hundreds of years old. Hundreds of years old. We're looking like 1700s, right? This is hundreds of years old. And this is how it's done. And I don't want you to think that I haven't ruffled feathers. I've absolutely ruffled feathers in giving lectures away for free. Right? But, you know, what's going to happen? I don't really care. Right? There is a sense in which not only must my acts conform to the establishment, but the establishment is so powerful, it has so much force, it has so much influence that it infiltrates your mind. Right? And this is what Nietzsche says becomes the condition for this lie. We tell ourselves that I have a conscience. And my conscience should be telling me, hey Jason, you know, it's not really fair to your students who pay $3,000 a class, and I've heard this obviously from other people, but it's not really fair to your students who pay $3,000 a class to watch the very same lectures that you give to people for free on the internet, because that's what I do. The lectures that you watch, my theories lectures, my genocide lectures, the lectures, not this lecture, not Nietzsche, this is totally free, but a lot of the lectures that I put up are exactly the same lectures that my students watch, and we have discourse and discussion on that. Well, it doesn't seem to be fair that they have to pay to watch it, and other people in the world get to watch the exact same lectures for free. And I've discussed this in my video called Knowledge 101, right? And this, my justification is that there's a distinction between having knowledge and being acknowledged for knowledge. Ivory Tower is an institution of acknowledgement. But what I'm saying is that you, the general viewer, will not be acknowledged for the knowledge you get from me. You're not going to have a degree because of the knowledge that you have from me, but you will have exactly the same knowledge. And I think that's fair, right? And this is the argument, and this is the battle that I'm fighting. So, you know, pretty powerful stuff. Now, we talked about the lie, and the lie that I wanted to look at was in terms of the philosopher priest was the idea of conscience, right? This lie. But Nietzsche specifically talks about a holy lie, and I want to talk about exactly what that is and how it manifests for his discourse. So these are 5 consequences of the holy lie. 5 consequences. Right, 5 consequences of the holy lie. Number 1, a God who punishes and rewards is the first lie that the priests tell. Right? So a God who punishes and rewards. Now, in fairness, you know, it would be interesting to have people who have divinity degrees and people who, or just people who really know their religious texts. It doesn't have to be the Bible. It could be the Quran. It could be the Torah. It could be whatever your religious texts are. I'm not going to have a formal sort of, I'm not going to have a formal invitation from contributors for this point. But if you want to post a video response to this, if you want to challenge Nietzsche on this, challenge him, right? It would be good to get someone from the quote-unquote opposition to say, hey, no, Nietzsche's getting this wrong. He really doesn't understand. You know, he's misconstruing a lot of this. The point is, my point is, I don't sit at the trough and just swallow all things Nietzsche. I don't sit at the trough and swallow any philosopher wholly. There's a lot of stuff that he says that's good. There's a lot of stuff that I think he's sort of just, oh, I don't like Christians, I don't like Jesus. You know, there's a lot of sort of bemoaning. But there's a lot where there's potential for him to be just categorically wrong with respect to his interpretation of the text. I don't know religious text well enough to lecture on it, but if you happen to know religious texts well enough, then these 5 points of the Holy Lie, this would be a great place for you to do a response and say, this is why Nietzsche's wrong, right? He's wrong because of, you know, X, Y, Z. And for my community of viewers, if there is someone who actually does a reply to this, and again, I'm not doing a formal video response or call for contributions, but if you do watch this and you do feel a need, because you are a believer, to put in your 2 cents, I ask that my community of viewers respect your thoughts, right? Don't go trolling them and say, oh, you believer and all that, right? As I told you before, I am a person of faith, right? I believe in, you know, things other than biology. But I'm not going to talk about specifically what that is because it's just far too complicated. But it would be interesting to see if religious believers of whatever kind agree with Nietzsche's interpretation, just to have a true sort of discourse on this topic, right? The next lie is the afterlife. Right? A God who punishes and rewards, first. The second is an afterlife, right? And, you know, Nietzsche, I think, is very, very clear. Much later in the discourse, we'll talk about this idea of the afterlife and sort of the ontological leap that's made to talk about the afterlife and how this just becomes sort of just false. It becomes a lie, right? So we'll talk about that later because he goes into more detail on this point later. Number 3, a conscience in man, right? This is absolutely important. I've spent a lot of time discussing this already, right? The idea that we have a conscience, according to Nietzsche, is probably for me, it's one of the greatest lies ever told. And I actually believe that we don't have a conscience. Personally, I don't typically divulge my views because my views are so complicated to explain because it's bits and pieces of a whole bunch of views. But I absolutely agree with Nietzsche 100% wholeheartedly that this is one of the greatest lies ever told, right? The lie that there is this thing called a conscience, right? Right? That there is a conscience in human beings, that there's a conscience in man, I think was the quote from Nietzsche, and that also is a lie. And here's the question, and I sort of posed this, maybe in not this video, I think it was in the last series, the last sort of block of videos. Here's the question. This is just a random question that I decided to ask when I was researching this. Is the contemporary scientific pursuit to understand human consciousness the last remnant of Christian influence, and I should have put on, let me put that so I can clear it, on the sciences? So I'll read it again. Based on everything that we said until this point with respect to Nietzsche, I think it's a good moment to pause and to think sort of lucidly, is the contemporary scientific pursuit to understand human consciousness the last remnant of Christian influence on the sciences? I don't necessarily have